You are listening to The Bo's Nose, a podcast about education where the wonderful students and teachers can share their stories. And I'm your host, Mr. Bose, and today is another Teacher Spotlight. Teacher Spotlight is where we celebrate the amazing work of teachers across Putnam County and beyond. With me today, I have Teacher of the Year candidate Brittany Johns from Palatka Jr. Senior High School. Thank you for joining me today. Please introduce yourselves to our listeners.
Hi. So like Mr. Bose said, I'm Brittany Johns. I teach 7th grade advanced civics at Palatka Jr. Senior High School, and I also teach one block of the Avid elective.
So wonderful. So first question is kind of across your years of teaching, what's your favorite school story or school tradition?
Tradition, always, it's going to be homecoming week because the energy at the high school, I'm sure that's like a very common week that most people talk about, but the energy at the school is very high. There's excitement. We do the dress up days beforehand, the spirit days, the pep rallies. And it's just like that traditional high school feeling that like everyone across ages can relate to. And then it transitions over to the football field on Friday, and it's just a good time.
Absolutely. Homecoming is always a good time. So if you could time travel, when would you go and why?
I was looking at this question for days, and I could not figure out just one. I'm a history teacher, so there's about a million times I would want to go to. But I actually landed on one that it was kind of more of a personal thing than more of a history teacher related thing. I lived in Central Florida for, goodness gracious, maybe 3 or 4 years in college. And if you travel the back roads down the original old Florida highways, they used to be lined with orange groves. And I was there on the tail end of the orange groves. Eventually, they just bulldozed them all down and built houses and developments. And I remember distinctly one afternoon, just the smell of orange groves in bloom and the way that they looked. And then I started reading a book called Bubble in the Sun about the land boom in the 20s and 30s in Florida. So I think I would like to go back to that time, really just to smell the orange groves in their full glory again before they all were taken down and burned away.
That's cool. I could totally imagine that growing up in the Midwest when all the sweet corn was ready to harvest. There was that very distinct smell. Yeah. So I love that. It's much better than some of the students I interview that are like, I want to go back to the 90s because the fashion was just great.
That was so long ago. And I'm like, listen, that's offensive to me. Stop.
Yeah, I'm like, I mean, you can go back to the 90s if you want, but it wasn't all it was cracked up to be.
I mean, it's just like every other generation. It wasn't the best all the time.
So next question is, what's your story of how you got into education?
Long and a little convoluted. When I was younger, I wanted to be a lawyer only because I watched Law and Order with my dad and they got paid to argue and I loved to argue. And then I guess it had to have been late, maybe early 2000s. I can't really remember the year, but my older cousin Kim came and lived with us for like her last semester or two of college at UNF, and she was a teacher in the county for a long time. And she let me grade papers with her one day, and that was it. I was hooked. So middle school me was like, yes, I get to grade papers. This is so fun. It's satisfying some kind of, itch in the back of my brain. And then when I graduated high school, I mean, that was just kind of like the progression that I took. And then I had a moment where I was like, I don't want to do this. And so I tested out different majors, and I just fell back into education because it's just somewhere I felt like I belonged. And that's kind of where I'm at. And so I've been teaching since 2020, and I'll be finishing my master's degree in ed leadership in August. And so it's just kind of when I decided to be an educator, it kind of just took off.
Wonderful. The grading thing resonates with me because I used to help my mom grade her times tables test. She had like this template
Oh,
you laid
yeah.
on top of it, and it
Uh-huh.
if it
And
was
then you could just go zoom, zoom, zoom all the
Yep.
way down. It was the best. And now I hate grading. It's the worst part of my job.
right. We're like, can I make this on the computer so I don't have to
That's
grade
what I
it?
do. How can I put this as a quiz in Canvas so it auto grades?
So you mentioned you were going back to your master's in ed leadership. What are you wanting to get out of that? Are you looking for principal or coach or?
So I used to want to go from the classroom straight to the dean's office because discipline was always something I was good at, and management, and it's about relationships at its core. But now I have been thinking about it. I would like to to think about instructional coaching because that also is something that I enjoy. So right now I'm just kind of looking at all options. Eventually, administration is one of the ultimate goals because, I mean, that's pretty much the purpose of an ed leadership degree in many capacities. But I do think I'd like to start off with instructional coaching or MTSS coordination, something that's still heavy on the instruction piece before leaving it and moving into management.
Yeah, that solid grounding in the classroom is always important for our principals and assistant principals.
Right.
So you teach civics and you said one section of AVID. So what's kind of your favorite part of teaching your subject?
Can I go with civics? Because this one I was prepared for.
Absolutely.
AVID is fun. I love organizing and taking notes. Like that's just part of me. Not every kid loves that. But when it comes to teaching civics, we do a lot of the early American history. And the one thing middle schoolers know better than anything else is drama and pettiness. And so I always enjoy, y'all know. And so I always enjoy framing a lot of the American history piece with like in the scope of like, this is drama. And, when the colonies and England were going back and forth, it was just one person trying to out petty the other. And at first it takes them a minute to get it. And then they're like, oh my gosh, yes, I get it. And so, and it's just fun because they'll come up to me and they'll tell me all of their drama. And so then I can go, oh, you mean like, this piece of history? When we study the Declaration of Independence, I tell them it's like a breakup letter. And so then I ask them, who's ever been in a relationship before? They all raise their hand at some point. And then who's ever been broken up with before? Or who's ever dumped somebody? And then like all of the girls raise their hand like, oh, I did him. He did me so dirty, Miss Johns. You don't understand. And then I'll go, okay, so think about it this way. The Declaration of Independence is just a really long list of how England did the colonies dirty and why the colonies breaking up with them. And then it's quiet and they go, oh yeah. So I think that's my favorite part is really just being able to play into the drama that is middle school and using it to my advantage.
That's awesome. And I think that is the big struggle for teachers in education is like how to take that old language, even if it's not that old, and connect it to like what the students are used to and how they're used to talking and their frame of reference.
I honestly can't wait till they learn about King Henry VIII and his 6 wives, because that's one of my favorite pieces that I'm not going to teach that. It's not relevant to civics, but I can't wait till they hear about it.
Yeah, and then you can play them 6, the musical, and they can learn all about it. So you said you started in 2020. So, kind of the perfect time to start in education. So how do you think you personally, kind of your practice has evolved since you started until now?
My official teaching career started in 2020. Before that, I had done a lot of long-term subbing. I'd say about 4 years of long-term subbing in the county. And so I had gotten really good at going into a classroom, like if a teacher had to leave or if there was a vacancy for that year. And so the benefit to that was I kind of practiced everything before it counted, if that makes sense. I always counted educationally speaking for the kids, but for me, a lot of trial and error. But the biggest thing is I'm not scared to teach anymore. When you're in the college classes, they will have you so worried about saying the wrong word or the wrong phrasing or not using enough academic language or walking too close to a kid. There's just so many things that you learn that you do are wrong. And so for the first like couple of years in the classroom, the first year, I would say, when it really started to count for me, I was terrified to like mess up. And it ended up hindering my ability to actually teach the kids and reach the kids. And so I think at one point I was just like, you know what? Instead of trying to hit some arbitrary mark on a rubric of a college classroom, let me just teach. Let me be comfortable in my classroom. And then when I was starting to feel comfortable, the kids would feel comfortable, that they can pick up on those, for lack of better terms, vibes very easily. If you're not comfortable, if you're not strong in your subject, they're going to figure you out. And so I think that's the biggest piece of how it's changed is like, now this classroom, it's my classroom. It's decorated how I like it. It's very on brand. I don't like harsh lights, so I have tons of lamps everywhere, and I have this big giant window. So, I mean, and then it's just being comfortable with you as a person and in your position is like the biggest thing that's changed for me, I think.
I think that's important. I know that was my struggle my first year teaching. Is, you know, you get the test results back and you're like, they all did bad. Like, what did I do wrong?
Yeah, it's so disheartening. But yeah.
So did you have a mentor teacher or someone that kind of helped you through that process, or was it just kind of?
I did. I did and I didn't. I had her name was Renee Wright. She was in there with me my first year. And then after that, I've had, I don't know if you know Octavia Lee. She used to work here in the county at Jenkins with me because that's where I first went to was Jenkins. She's moved over to St. Johns County. And then Stephanie Smith, who is because I'm still in that 5-year window. And so she'll pop in every once in a while to check on me, make sure I'm doing what I need to do. But a lot of it, really, my strengths came from what I learned as a sub. So a lot of the things that mentor teachers will do for early teachers now, I went through before that program was put in place. So now we're just kind of like sounding boards more than anything else, which is still a benefit, a huge benefit.
Yeah, subbing, I bet you got a lot of the classroom management stuff kind of under your belt.
It was a hot mess. My 2016 kids at Mellon in 5th grade, I had to apologize to as they got older because they're like seniors now. And so I see them again. I'm like, I'm so sorry. That year was my first year. And you got to forgive me. It's my bad.
Yeah. So one of the questions that we had to answer for the Teacher of the Year thing, and that's our next question, is what inspires you as an educator?
The light bulbs, those light bulb moments that happen in the classroom. And it often seems to play out like on like the hardest days that I'm having where I'm struggling with the content or something. A kid in one of my classes is going to get a light bulb of some sort. And it just kind of reminds me that, you know, it's hard, it's tough because teaching isn't easy by any stretch of the imagination, but it's worth it. Because the light bulbs that come, they're learning something, and it could be a social emotional skill because we also do a lot of that in our classrooms. It could be a content related skill. It could be like just an aha the kid has about anything. And it just kind of keeps me going and it inspires me to continue to do it because I don't know, I'm sure we've all had them. There are days where I'm like, all right, this is it. This is the last day. I'm done. I can't possibly do this for 26 more years. It's not going to happen. But then like, just when you say it in your head, something happens and the kid understands the concept, or a kid who struggles made an 80 on a quiz and they're like losing their minds because they're so excited about it. And you're like, okay, I was just kidding. I'll stay. I am doing something important.
I think you just summarized education.
Yeah, pretty much.
Oh. Yeah, I definitely have those days in math when the kids are just, when it's frustrating one day and the next day they're like all up and writing math problems and like it looks like the movie Beautiful Mind in my classroom and I'm like, maybe I know what I'm doing here.
I do not envy your content area. I think if they asked me to teach math, I'd probably cry through every lesson. That's why I teach civics, and my kids tell me that all the time because I can't even add half the days. I'm just like, whatever.
Well, I did my stint with the younger kids, with the 7th and 8th graders, and had to age up because that was not where my strong suit was for sure.
It is a very special person who is like, give me middle school.
Yeah,
I'm not sure what it says about us, but it is.
Elementary school teachers, middle school teachers.
Ooh, they have
No,
all in my heart.
I mean, my mom taught 5th and 6th graders for almost 35 years, and nope.
I'm good. If I ever changed, I think it would be just to go up to a higher history.
So, well, what history would you want to teach if you?
I don't know, because all of it's so interesting. I think honestly, I'd be happy in any history subject. We lump economics in with social studies. Don't give me economics because I don't like it. I did it in high school and I did it like 3 times in college, and it's not for me. So anything but econ, I'll take, because I love all of it.
Yeah, history is interesting. I always loved it. So for students in your classroom, kind of what's your ultimate goal for them?
To know that I love them. A lot of the students, because of course I'm in central Putnam County, our demographics are very wide, from one end of this poverty spectrum to the other. And I teach them, they'll come in my classroom, I'll give them the content, but I want them to understand that I also love them and value them as a person, because not every kid gets that when they leave school. So yes, a goal is success, but there are kids that I had because I taught kindergarten for a while as a sub, and they're now juniors and seniors at the high school. And it's like, they'll come back to me. How long was that? Like 10 years later? Has it really been that long? Goodness gracious. Ooh, time. It hits you sometimes out of the blue how long you've been doing stuff.
Yeah. We just got an email today for the 6th graders that are coming out to visit QI for 7th grader, the class of 2030. And I was just like, whoa, hang on.
Time out. My kids this year are 2029. I'm like, what is even? That's not even a year. That's ridiculous. But back to the question, that is my ultimate goal, because they'll come back to me if they're hungry, or if they want a water, or if they want some of my candy. I got like 3 or 4 boys who are seniors who will come back and raid the candy bucket almost weekly, because they know that Miss Johns always has candy. So I think that is my ultimate goal. And the learning happens when they know that I love them. Because I think one of the other questions was like your educational philosophy. And I always have been a proponent of a student must Maslow before they can bloom. Before they can learn anything from you, they have to have their basic needs met. Otherwise, it's just not going to happen. So, and I think that kind of ties into my philosophy is a student isn't going to learn from you, A, if they are hungry, or they didn't sleep the night before, or if mom and dad stayed up all night fighting, or if the heater was off because they couldn't afford it, any of those reasons. But when they like you and they know that you like them, that's when they'll be willing to learn from you, if that makes sense.
No, that totally makes sense. And I think that's kind of part of the teacher preparation program that, like, we talk about Maslow and the hierarchy of needs, but until you're in the classroom, until you're in a place where you really see that, it doesn't, I don't think for a lot of teachers it sets in. And I think sometimes for people who, I don't want to say necessarily aren't cut out for teaching, but like that's the part that takes the most of their soul, because they're not ready for it.
Yeah, and then it's the hardest part for them to grasp, because of course we use our own experiences to mold how we interact with people. But the hardest part for a lot of teachers that I've noticed is they expect the kids to come in, sit down, sit up in their chair, have a pencil ready, and learn. And in this day and age, that's not the scope of teaching anymore. It's the traditional view of teaching. Come in, sit down, be quiet, and listen to me talk. But there's so much more that goes into it. And I think the biggest piece that a lot of teachers or people who teach miss is like a kid is a person, and they come with their whole world of experiences, and you don't know half the things that they're experiencing at home once they leave your classroom. So you kind of have to begin to force yourself to be attuned to that.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes we lose sight of that and like try to label students or classify them, and like they're all people, they're all kids that just want to be cared for and want to be like, ultimately I think all students want to be challenged, like challenged appropriately, but they want to learn. It's not that they want to not know anything. They want to learn, and the difficulty of education is, as you've said, navigating like, okay, how can I get through all of the other stuff?
Yes, all the extra that comes besides just being in your classroom. Because I think all the extra can bog you down sometimes. You just got to set it to the side. You got to compartmentalize for 45 minutes at a time.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so that I think kind of leads into the next question really well is, so what advice would you give either a new first-year teacher or, maybe one of those seniors that you have that keep coming back raiding your candy drawer that says, hey, Miss Johns, I want to be a teacher?
Are you sure? Is the first question. I think all of us ask any kid, are you sure? And, I don't know if it's advice or not. It was just like, it's not sunshine and rainbows 24/7. And it is not just teaching. Sometimes we're a therapist. Sometimes we're a laundry service. I've washed clothes for kids and found them clean clothes. Sometimes we're like a lunch lady. Or, there's all kinds of hats we wear throughout the day. And so a lot of people, like my niece is 14 and she thinks she wants to teach. And I encourage that. If that's something that's going to fulfill you, please don't let me stop you from doing it. But if you're asking me for my advice, I'm going to tell you the good and the bad. And then sometimes the bad outweighs the good, and sometimes the good outweighs the bad. It just really depends on each piece. But my advice for a first-year teacher would most likely be it's going to suck, for lack of a better term. That first year is really everything you've learned theoretically in the college classroom. While it helps you with like strategies and pedagogy, it doesn't prepare you to be in that classroom. So understand that there's going to be a lot you're going to have to learn on your own. Reach out to people who are around you who have been there longer. Do not be afraid to ask for help. A lot of the reasons I think our new teacher retention across the country is so low. If you've got TikTok, I'm on like education side of TikTok, and there's just so many teachers who are like, I quit, I walked out, and that's like them turning their keys in. I made it 6 months into their first year, and I'm like, why? What is going on? But it's because they've isolated themselves to a certain extent. They were afraid to ask for help. And that was one thing I wasn't afraid to do. I knew enough throughout my life to know that I knew nothing. And there are people who are way more intelligent than I am on any topic in the world. It hurt my ego a little bit in the beginning, but I'm okay now. I'm okay now. So that would be my advice for anybody, because even as we continue working in education changes 24/7. So I could have been highly effective 10 years ago in this strategy, in this field of education, this view of it. But if it's changing, I'm going to have someone who knows come in and help me. And I think that would be it, really. Just it's going to be tough, but it does end, and you do become better for it. The toughness doesn't last.
Yeah, I think that's what you talked about asking for help is really important. We tell our students that every day in the classroom, like if you have a question, ask. That's what we're here for. But I think sometimes as teachers, we need to hear that too. Like it's okay to ask for help. There are people out there. You're not alone.
Yeah, we're a team. We really are, but we can't help you if we don't know you need help. So.
Right. I think it's the doctors make the worst patients. I think teachers make the worst students, maybe.
The worst. I know it. It's all true.
All righty. So don't want to take up too much of your morning because we both have to get ready for school. So last question I have is, if you had a magic wand and could change or fix one thing about education, what would it be?
That we would worry about history before 7th grade. The biggest struggle I have, and I know that we quote unquote tie history lessons into reading, and I understand that, and cool. But the problem I'm having with my students is before I can teach them what the state of Florida expects them to learn in 7th grade, I have to teach them 5th grade and 6th. I have to go back and go, hey, remember this. And this is nothing against any classroom teacher, because we have laws and pacing guides and things that we have to follow. We really don't get much say in what we teach, if that makes sense. There's a curriculum, we have to follow it. So I did the civics initiative class last summer, and they would talk about all of the things like the standalone history items that teachers are teaching in elementary school to prepare students for these higher history classes. And I'm thinking back to when I taught the lower grades. I mean, I have enough experience. I've taught a little bit of everything, but I also, education's in my family. I kind of know what the actual focus is. And it's like, I don't think Tallahassee is understanding what's happening in the classroom. And we're doing a huge disservice to our kids by waiting until they're 12 to teach them about their country, their states, things like that. And I know there's been a shift in the latter years, and it is noticeable, but I just really wish education would begin to care more about history sooner.
I totally get that. I feel the same way about math. We have the accountability is good because I think it's good to have a good measurement of where all the students are, but because of the school grades and everything tied to it, it does feel like, okay, well, we care about reading until 3rd grade, and then science until 5th grade, and then we'll care about civics until 7th, and then we'll care about math in 9th grade.
And it's just you can't compartmentalize that, because to create a well-rounded person, they have to know all of it. I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good fix. So do you have anything else you want to share or talk about this morning?
I don't know. This is the first time I've ever done a podcast, so I was kind of nervous to hop on. I mean, I realized after I had gotten ready that you're not going to see my face. So I took extra time this morning to get ready, and then I was like, wait a minute, Brittany, this is like radio, but back in the day radio. He's not going to see you. No one's going to see you. So I don't really have any questions. I think I was just worried about making sure I answered everything for you.
You did. I think that was fun.
It was fun. I liked that.
Thank you for taking time to sit down and talk and share your stories this morning. And
I love that.
Yeah, and
I got the email and I was like, "Oh, this is so cool! I love this."
Yeah, so I did Dr. Parker last week, and I've got one more that's already agreed to sign up. So hopefully we can get the rest of the people on board. So listeners, I hope you enjoyed the podcast.
Yes,
listeners, if you like the podcast, subscribe on your favorite podcast player of choice so you don't miss out on future episodes, and please share with your friends. Until next time, excellence in all endeavors.